Good morning, my friends. You are now attending the lecture online remotely for YouTube Masterclass, and I'm Dr. Aaron Sheley. I got my doctorate at the California Institute of the Arts, among other places in academia, universities, colleges. The American Film Institute gave me a Master's of Fine Arts, and I got my Bachelor of Arts at the legendary University of Southern California, where I did most of my film studying and then studied writing in general at CalArts, which I got a general writing PhD for that. So it isn't exactly the critical studies degree, but that is a critical studies degree. Lo and behold, is the writing degree. And it's a writing department. And what better way to express critical studies than writing? And I was talking to a colleague of mine that helped me write a book a couple of weeks ago, and she was explaining to me that you can't actually make it through grad school in a writing program without really writing anything and be a better writer than a lot of people without really writing anything, because it comes from the head and comes from the heart. And I thought, well, that's true, but see, at my school, CalArts, we got this randomizer machine, and we're not really supposed to talk about that, but the randomizer hit me in the back and told me I had to write a book. So I wrote 40 books instead, and now I'm on book like 58, because when you're a PhD, you got to keep stacking up the work, and that's what we're doing, kind of teaching you. But we want you to learn from this class. It's a USC class too. We're all approved at USC. We keep on saying fight on Trojans, reality ends here, and all those insignias. And we love the American Film Institute because they restore film, they archive film, they keep film alive. And that means film and video, because video, though it doesn't deteriorate as fast, and these movies that are on film are literally put on video, digital video discs, DVD, and film and video has to be archived, kept alive. Now with these technologies, with the cloud and these technologies, where you can put a file of media onto the internet for supposedly nearly infinite time, and this stuff never runs out. And so I can picture a universe that's carrying around satellites to the end of time that had nothing but film reviews, and especially film reviews of 2001: A Space Odyssey, which brings me to the theme today, and that is special effects, and special effects in film and special effects in cinema. And there's no difference really between film or cinema, except cinema again covers the video, cinema covers TV. Cinema is the automated process, the automated projection of moving images, of a succession of automated images, and this is what cinema is and what the movies are. And that was actually from Noel Carroll in in the World Viewed. Uh, he was saying that all these factions of cinema making come into the thing we can see most, and that is the automated progression of automatic images, or succession of images. And it's kind of hard to explain, and it's actually Stanley Cavell that did The World Viewed. I stand by correction. Please don't judge me yet. But remember, Stanley Cavell's World Viewed is a philosophy book. And philosophy in film is somewhat experimental, and where they go to the edge of not talking about cinema, then they really hit a hard edge point by defining cinema, these film and philosophy. And I said Noel Birch came up with the institutional mode of representation, or the general mode of representation, and it became the standard mode of representation. And it all started from the primitive. Now, the primitive, we understand, is when editing rules aren't abided by, and it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be edited well, but they don't know how. And then you can contrast that with someone that's drawing attention to the editing bumps in the film and the editing strikes in the film, and that's a way to bring you in and say, we did that strike here on purpose, or like the continuity. You see a movie like Raging Bull, and you're in black and white, and you're in this kind of somber environment after a boxing match got real bloody, and next thing you know, whoosh, the camera goes color, and there's colors, a special effect. Black and white seems like it's being used as a special effect in Raging Bull, and you get this color scheme of this home movie, this like 16 millimeter, 8 millimeter color film of De Niro and his wife, and he's playing Jake LaMotta, and you have Joe Pesci, and they're at this family get together, and there's a pool, and it's beautiful, and it's this nice house, and everybody's getting along, and you're like, this is the home movie in the middle of Raging Bull, and of course they've got the underscore going to the film, and you're like, whoa, this is enormously emotional, and you're so drawn into the film, and you think, that's the special effect, is just going from black and white to color. You think about all the times that color has been monochrome keyed or chromatic keyed to where you get a little bit of color and the rest is black and white. They did that magnificently in Sin City. I've been doing some advocate work for Sin City. As soon as I tried to contact Criterion Collection, they were in, dude. They said they already looked at Sin City as a title and were approved of it. So go to my YouTube site, Aaron Sheedy YouTube site. Check out the copy of Sin City I have, because actually when you program it the way I did, like Criterion actually has their color correction and their formal time codes and their distinct touch added to the upgrades of the audio video. The audio video upgrades are not really controversial, but you can pay for that effect, or you can talk to the studios about running that effect even on distribution level so that the film gets out there to more people, and so now it's a studio film. Speaking of studio films, studios were the ones that used special effects and makeup almost symbiotically together, and that we're not going to talk much about makeup in this, but I will say makeup's interesting because I'm not trying to be general about this, but makeup is working out better for my cousins who directed many of the shows that we made for this television or this internet program, and internet programs are different than television programs by far. We won't go into those differences quite yet, but we made these series called Two Badass Businesses, and everybody's like, well, what's business? Nobody actually asked that, but it's actually like the less sexist way to say they're awesome. It's like when you call somebody a badass, and then they think that I just get insulted, and they're like, no, that's not an insult. But we only do that to be ambiguous and to differentiate our show from all others. But they knew so much about makeup that by the time of season 3 and season 4, if you're watching real closely, and there's even this truncated episode of this costumier drama in the 4th series, the 4th season, and you realize they're so sharp about makeup that they're sitting there showing you tips while they're telling you other tips, and they're just going by it so fast that, like, I'm sitting there going, man, I don't know anything about makeup. I'd look a lot better on my MASTERCLASS with, like, lipstick, you know. But no, and I'm just being silly, but makeup's a huge part of the movie, and those movies were good because the makeup artistry was by far one of the best things about them, and it was one of the most capable ways they could say they deserved their online series awards. And those online series awards were something I needed to get for my resume. You know, got to get my resume out for my PhD. Well, there's a lot of things that go towards that, and anything that can go towards that that's a good idea is good. So getting the studio release of my own films that had for a long time just been underground independent works was a big break for me. But you look at this film, and this is where we kind of stand with what we're talking about with Two Badass Businesses, Orgy of the Damned, and everything. This is a movie called Carnival of Souls. Now, the makeup technique in this film is brilliant, but let me give you a little background. In Wyoming, there was a guy named Herc Harvey who'd never made movies before, maybe sat in on a couple of film lectures, watched a few movies that he could, but didn't really have access to a theater anywhere. And one day in the 50s, 60s, late 50s, early 60s, he wakes up and says, I'm going to make a movie. I'm going to put all my money together and make a freaking movie, and it won't, they did this with some movies that failed with this, were like Manos Hands of Fate, which is funny and kind of scary and kind of choppy and based even on real mythology. It still is so piano player suddenly appearing. Like, it's avant-garde. We won't admit that some of the exploitation that's bad is avant-garde, and if we watched it as avant-garde, Manos, which is one of those films that people walk out feeling lousy because they don't think they learned anything about the history of film, is the whole point of that film. But Carnival of Souls is different. It adheres to its cinematic laws. And by cinematic laws, I mean cutting techniques, match on action, institutional mode of representation, no birds. And then we have Carnival of Souls being this like kind of classical modern. It's like this whole modern seaminess of this. And it's a female star. And she's not really a movie star, but she is now because what happens is so beautiful. It's even better than what's happened to some of these indie films that I've been doing. The studios call her a curvy, and they hear about his film and they want his film to hit a worldwide release. A worldwide release. And he's almost done, and he ties it up with the most climactic scene where this movie is about this lady who's actually dies in a car crash. Ambiguously, does she die, does she not? At the beginning of the movie, and then she wanders around in this town and she sees ghosts. Ghosts see her. She interacts with regular humans. Sometimes the sound goes out. There's a weird glitch in this where the sound is kind of even jerking back and forth. And one of the reasons for that is it was the lowest, speaking of which, it was the lowest budget movie that totally made tons of money. And studios love that because they put money into it anyway, besides the budget not counting. They put all their efforts into getting it promoted so that when it goes out, it gets seen. That's why the studios are so nice. Because they usually launch this distribution thing, and the fact that they distributed Carnival of Souls, and it's a great movie. She's seeing ghosts, and she has to talk to her psychiatrist while there's like a ghost in the room, and she's always trying to scream, and the sound is muted. So she goes off and finds the Carnival of Souls, and all of a sudden there's ghosts everywhere, and it's dance macabre, and it ends almost apocalyptically in this Night of the Living Dead kind of setup way. And there's zombies, and there's this guy that's like the ringleader, and he's always looking at her like, the ghosts are here and there's nothing you can do. Carnival of Souls, we think of, the idea is like a quote, is almost Shakespearean. You see the masses and the feelings, and then the distinguished souls that had to live in this kind of carnivalesque facade. And it's a beautifully philosophical film, and I can't love it enough. And I think of low budget films like even the Blair Witch Project, and Carnival of Souls is made with more craft even because they had to have costumes, makeup. The makeup design on the zombies is like this dark gothic eyes and white makeup on the face. Really revolutionary. If you're looking for a Halloween movie, this is good. The special effects are so subtle but so pronounced that you have these ideas that you can be talking in mid-sentence and have your voice cut out of silent. Now, when you see Godard do this, it's not really scary because the characters are switching out and the scene is switching out and the cuts are coming early and the cuts are coming late. But in Carnival of Souls, there's this distinct quality of whether or not she's real or even seen by anyone, or whether she can communicate with our side, the other side, or anyone, or she's deteriorating sort of into this ghost that's with all these other well-done makeup people. And that's why Carnival of Souls is a hit. It's a great movie. It's still effective. There's a Criterion version. I have the generic version, and I love this generic version. I was so happy. I went through my storage and found my horror movies because I had to take them out of here because they were unleashing evil spirits on the room. But get this, I needed some evil spirits back in the room, so I went and got my horror films. Now, makeup effects are only one thing that's a special effect, but they're so pronounced in Hollywood that there's usually a makeup effect artist, and even a makeup effect artist can win an Oscar. Now, here's the interesting thing. Makeup effects artists are underrated in such a way that I've never even heard of, like, other than maybe a few USC CALARTS gets-togethers, as training to become a makeup artist. And of course, makeup artistry is passed on, and it's like a skill. And and these guys that were doing like even these theatrical productions, really small Wyoming theatrical productions, are now in this full-blown Hollywood movie that's everywhere, all because of their makeup effects of blacking these ghost guys' eyes out. I mean, that could be really cheesy in some context, but that they're totally characteristically playing the role to the most true, authentic effect is why we're all worried that we're trapped in Wyoming with ghosts or without them, with or without ghosts, right? And so the special effects aren't digital, really. I mean, it's a digital transfer, right? Everything is on digital video, but the film stock and special effects, whether they're in camera or not, a lot of times revolve on editing techniques to be special effects. She'll look in one direction real fast, and the camera will real fast show a clip to where she's looking. And then she'll look back the other way and scream because there's like a ghost right on her cusp, you know? And that's a special effect. I mean, you think about Méliès and how he used editing for the special effect of him disappearing. He's standing there, he walks off, he's standing there, he yells cut or stop or whatever to stop the camera. He walks off the set, then they start the camera again where he was missing, and you play it back, whoosh, it looks like he disappears. That's how they did the umbrella lightsaber scene in the trip to the moon. She hits him, then they yell cut, and then the guy walks off the frame, they put a bunch of smoke in the air, and then they yell action, and now it looks like the sky turned into a billow of smoke. You eliminate the object in the frame before you start recording again, and everything else stays in the frame where it already was, and that is the in-camera effect. You're going to love this, of disappearing on camera. Now, I'm not going to edit this video with any special effects. Like, I have special defects. Now, that's kind of a mean thing to say, but I have special effects, but they're like corrosively less than Carnival of Souls. My makeup artistry didn't come through today. My shirt needs tied to make it wider because it's starting to loosen down. I'm all tired because I was having a movie fest last night, and I don't remember what I watched or didn't watch, but I remember checking out these Latino rock bands that were really tripping me out, and I couldn't stop watching it. And the more I watched it, they would like stretch it on the internet. I'm like, are they recording and putting this on while I'm watching it? No, that can't be. But with internet technologies, there are ways to record a movie while other people are watching it and changing it with their direction of what they would pick the object of movement to be. Like kind of a video game or moving around a cartoon, or that is a video game, is moving a character in a cartoon, and video games usually have obstacles and everything. Now, video games are interesting because they have a lot of special effects, but a video game is like one big special effect on one view. But they also have narrative. Now, we've got to remember narrative and special effects go together. I mean, we have that in Carnival of Souls, but narrative and special effects are actually hand in hand. Like a lot of people that discuss technological determinism and say, well, James Cameron's really good and he makes good special effects movies, but why should I give him any credit? He spends too much money on special effects, or whatever they're saying, you know. Why should I give him any credit for telling a story? And I get the same review from like Ridley Scott's Gladiator. They're like, well, it's good special effects, but the story's not there. And then I hear this interview with Ridley Scott saying, well, he's showing the best movies and the ones that last are the ones with good plot and good character. I watched Gladiator, I watched Titanic. There's great plot and great character. It's the greatest story of Earth, Gladiator. Rise to the freaking challenge, man. I mean, this guy's the underdog. His whole team gets wiped out. His family's under siege or may already be dead in Valhalla. Marcus Aurelius is barking some weird Christianity stuff, and everybody's starting to get loused. And who steps in but Gladiator, Russell Crowe, you know, and he gets sold into slave trade, and these rustic teachers teach him slave trade, and it really, Scott is great with special effects because he makes everything look bigger. And some people are qualifying the Colosseum as kind of a sham in the Gladiator movie, but when I saw the Colosseum in real life, it had an overwhelming impression. You go down that hill and you're all rolling down there, and then there's like, all of a sudden, there's the Colosseum. And part of it's bombed out from World War II. But even the World War II bombed out quality makes you go like, this is amazing. And it's a totally different feeling than when you walk into Gladiator and see this huge gladiator. And it's so exaggerated. But, they used to do that with Metropolis or like Oof or like German expressionists, like make it so exaggeratingly big, like that Starry Night poster up there by Van Gogh. Make it so drearily expressionistically big that people marvel at it and go, wow. That artist must have perceived that as the biggest, most satanic, most like huge thing in the world that can never be accessed. It's like if the Holy Grail were a ship, it'd be the Titanic. And then they're going for the Grail. And these are special effect movies, Titanic and Gladiator, but I think the public and the studios really just won't get to the point and say they adapted the special effects into the storyline. Where there's digital tigers coming out of the ground or real tigers too coming out of the ground. And that's animal wrangling, and that's a different kind of thing. You have to have like zoology, like postdoctoral, like nurses on the staff, animal nurses. Russell Crowe's fighting these tigers that pop out in the middle of nowhere on the gladiator battle. Like his gladiator battles are getting more and more challenging, which is perfect for mythic structure because then you're picking up these threshold guardians in the gladiator pit and going on. And of course, Joaquin Phoenix is doing his best Joker routine and is actually rehearsing for the Joker in the middle of Gladiator. No, I'm kidding. But they're using these, and the character Russell Crowe, how could he be accused of just like nothing but a CGI moniker? And that's what I never got about Star Wars too. Is everybody's like, oh, everything's CGI, the whole thing's digital. But Ewan McGregor was maybe on digital stock, but I mean, they wouldn't need to remove anything or add anything to him as an actor, and he wore motion control movements to capture his movement. I'm still saying it's Russell Crowe and Gladiator and Ewan McGregor. There's an AI concept that you can make the actors look and move like they're saying what they want. Worry not, Hollywood. The style never works. Little kids that are like 3 prefer less the AI version of one of their favorite dinosaur friends in the morning than somebody actually getting on like a suit and looking like a guru and drag like me or whatever. And then if there was an AI of me, it would be so repugnant. I mean, I'm already like working my way to some kind of equilibrium here, but if there were an AI of me, it would just repeat like, film is good, I like film. And that's really all I should say anyway, so the AI would be right. But I'm just saying that like Gladiator and the movie Titanic are really good examples of movies, even like Carnival of Souls, where they seized together the biggest freaking budget they could. But in Gladiator and Titanic, they had the extreme emphasized special effect. Now, the extreme emphasized special effect we see in Spellbound by Alfred Hitchcock is there's a huge gun attached to a huge papier-mâché hand almost. And you can see this in Hitchcock Truffaut where they're talking about Spellbound, and Spellbound has this Salvador Dali dream sequence. It's originally about a hospital full of witches, but now it's psychological. Gregory Peck's having all these flashbacks to like all these things that happened that were bad as a child. His sister died, the sledding accident. There's all these horrible things that are coming up in Hitchcock's at his best. But then right towards the end of the movie, there's this big hand with a big gun, and it's a reverse shot from this guy holding a gun, and you think that's an extreme object perspective of the hugest gun I've ever seen pointing someone down and about to shoot him. And then you realize that he does it for the extreme expressionism, not just to draw attention to himself as a modernist, like, this is what I want you to see, but how big the movies are and how big that can be made in the movie is the special effect. Now, if you look at the definition of special effects, they're really an in-camera or a digital or organic effect in a movie that derives either character emphasization, plot direction, which plot direction comes from character emphasization too, it's all overlapping. And then the special effects draw attention to, and now look, it's not bad to draw attention to, that's what Godard does when he does the editing, and these got context. The special effects devise the plot movement and the character movement through makeup and other kinds of stop motion and motion control that'll shaping out the way a film looks. But to draw attention with a computer or emphasis from an organic effect like a film printer, like we were talking about with the original Star Wars Return of the Jedi, where he's shooting lightning bolt and they're printing onto every single frame, 24 frames a second, the variable movements that they've determined mostly by computer. That you can determine the movement but still have to render it is one of the reasons special effects houses even now take so long. I mean, you look at the Avengers, and this is a pivotal moment in special effects history of the Avengers, because now you watch the end credits, and Digital Domain is even in it, but like the Warner Brothers and Industrial Light and Magic are there. Every special effects house studio is paid tons of money to take over these big special effects numbers in the Avengers, and each number of Avengers special effects are like, even though they're 100 times more than Carnival of Souls, we love Avengers the way we love Carnival of Souls. Because when you look at the history of movie budgeting, even Gladiator and Titanic, they're using their own money that they made from a previous movie to spend on the next one. And it's their money, but like if it gets out of control in cost, that doesn't mean that movie was easier or harder to make. It just means that was all the money they had going into the movie, which makes perfect sense because that's all the money they had coming out of it. Like, I'm not saying the Carnival of Souls guy would have had to have made a big budget film because he did actually make money off of it. He could have gone on, but he would have drawn from the bucket that this film's worth money or stature even, being critically acclaimed. And then they can go off of Carnival of Souls and make more. Her curvy disappearing into some kind of like esoteric hermitage is just even more of what we love about Carnival of Souls. But I think my point is proving that just because you're emphasizing something in the frame of with the technology foregrounded, whether it's an in-camera effect like Méliès or digital like Titanic. And I sat in on some Digital Domain screenings, and I've sat in where on Digital Domain printing a special effect onto the film, making a giant. So now they've got this computer that blows up the person, make them look like a giant, shows you what angle to put them into the film, and then you click into the video monitor as it's clicking through each movement for 24 frames a second. And we've done some mathematical basis of what 24 frames would be like. Basically, you're looking at over an hour for a second long of special effects footage, and that's after an hour, so now you got 10 hours and you got 10 seconds of film at the end of the day. And if at Digital Domain they even get close to 10 seconds a day, which already costs a lot of money, and James Cameron's trying to pay less so he can only spend the money from the previous movie. And this is why budgeting is kind of an arbitrary factor, because you look at Samuel Fuller, and his movies are cheaper. They're just as good aesthetically, but we also remember a movie like a classical Hollywood movie like Wizard of Oz, which Wizard of Oz, we'll talk about that in this class, but that's the special effects extravaganza ever. I mean, between the witches and the costume and the makeup and the color design for the first time, and color being this transition into this heavenly Oz realm from the black and white is again another example of special effects motivating, expressionizing, drawing sensitivity towards, and pushing forward the plot point. Nobody ever looks at Wizard of Oz and say, these special effects are out of place. Why does the witch get to say surrender Dorothy with a smoke screen in the air? Which is one of my favorite special effects of all time. And when they cream the witch with water and she melts, or when the witch burns the scarecrow, she shoots a firebolt at the scarecrow. Let's face it, that tornado scene at the beginning where that dog napper old lady turned Margaret Hamilton or whatever turns into the witch outside her window is straight out of this movie, which I'd like to discuss the special effects of. And we've got our horror films back. We're all feeling bold and detective. Now, I've got a little. This is The Exorcist, and this is the 70s, and this is a good movie for this class because it also shows that whole Ridley Scott, James Cameron thing. But this is even before them and kind of marketable for them in some of their genre, like alien movies that they do that are horror sci-fi. But this isn't horror sci-fi, but may as well be, right? Because The Exorcist has one of those problems as like this hex and witch movie to adapt to the cultural yearnings of sort of what the Catholics want, but it blows it so far on its head with William Friedkin and Joseph Peter Blatty and all these expressionistic, and you can even say impressions are made in Carnival of Souls in these films. Impressions can be a special effect too, like with an avant-garde film. You can have suddenly a man with a movie camera, like a kettle and a pot, cooking, and then you go away and you see the lady kind of getting up, and then you see the kettle and the pot cooking, and it's sort of this abstract version of why we need coffee in the morning. Now, The Exorcist does rely on special effects so much that the whole thing, when it was re-released in 2002, it was already special effected out. And this version is the extended director's cut. There's so many versions of The Exorcist. I like this one. I don't even remember. A friend of mine gave me this because I gave her like The Conjuring or something. We made like a horror film trade. Now, in 1973, when this came out, there hadn't really been what were called blockbusters. Now, a blockbuster, we've talked, has many different definitions. But it's usually a film that cost a lot of money, because if it cost a lot of money, then it's got to make a lot of money. So now they're spending all this money on the publicity campaign, which is now almost more important than the budget of the film. And I got nothing against people that pay more on publicity than they do on the film, because they got more people to deliver to. And they've got to tailor the trailers, narrow cast, demographics. What do the audience want? So they're doing these what do the audience want things. William Friedkin comes in with kind of this anarchic glare, like we're going to really blow them up with this one. And the publicity campaign in this one's like, if you're possessed, call your Catholic Church immediately. It's like War of the Worlds. It's like, suddenly demons are everywhere, and only the Catholic Church can stop them. Now, and that kind of muddles this movie for me, too. I like Christians in war films where like, God has commanded me to take my cross and destroy the enemy. That's cool, but that's even a little weird, but the Christians in The Exorcist really don't make sense, because nobody's a Christian in the film except the priests, and really, why would they even think of getting a Christian over there when, really, do you know any Christians that like horror movies or want to be around a demon-possessed person or really think they're an exorcist? Like, there may be some Catholic priests and maybe even the Pope and a few other people in Europe that really are somewhat exorcists. If there is even really such a thing, and that seems like a fictitious title. Like, we just call it exorcism because the movie does. And that's why I still have that theory that most Bibles were written by Hollywood, because all throughout these Cecil B. DeMille films, they'll say something, and then suddenly the Bible will be renewed the next day with that scripture. And I'm not kidding, dude. So Hollywood is taking a scripture which really sends Friedkin into a bind and says, well, if you're going to believe this, suspended disbelief for this, then we're going all out rancid with special effects. And these are rancid special effects. And these are horror films we're talking about. Now, horror films are about the supernatural or the preternatural or the desire to overcome the dark side. Although overcoming the dark side, usually in a horror film, means you have to be totally encapsulated by the dark side. Usually the dark side is consuming you, and most horror films, they don't combat the dark side to where they can get it to get off their back. Now, the dark side of a supernatural is that Manichaean sense that, like, at night, everything's beautiful, but more evil. Not necessarily evil in the sense of, like, morals, but things at night can get more magical, more expressionized. In the day, all of us vampires are kind of melting in the sun, but at night, we're flourishing because the cool breeze is on us, and we've got things we've got to say. And, the dark side does kind of come from that idea of it being dark, but what it really is about is these, like, back to Book of Egypt, which is kind of in your dead, Book of the Dead, Necronomicon. You have like Van Eyck's readings, and these are all coming up into horror films like these Lord Byrons and these Draculas, Mary Shelley, Frankenstein, where they wrote the whole movie, wrote the book with a Ouija board, and you can actually read different books out of Frankenstein with a Ouija board there. It'll give you different books. Need to write a book? Take a Ouija board to Frankenstein. That's a special effect that you can't really do because magical principles in a film are kind of impossible because film detection is not sensitive necessarily to the supernatural. If it was, would you see a ghost behind me floating around correcting me in all of my obscenely insignificant film studies? No, they're not obscenely insignificant, but there's not a ghost floating around this room. But if I CGI'd one in, or say, like someone at CalArts was trying to play a trick and they sent a ghost across, and you're like, well, that still is a special effect, but now effects can be so laced in and wired in, and things can be done on the after effect of the internet and everything. But I gotta hand it to The Exorcist. It's like one of those straight out of the concept of like the Crowley LeVay, like we're purveyors of our inner ego, and we've got to boost it up to the point that we can handle the threshold guardian of the dark side and the monster. And the monster is like this abstract, objective correlative of everything in us that we don't like or are afraid of. Not really that we don't like, but everything that's in us that we're afraid of is the monster of this film. And that's kind of what horror films do. And that horror films have makeup effects doesn't surprise me, because you look at this Bride of Frankenstein movie in 1935 by James Whale, and again, it's the makeup artistry. And what they do is they highlight and accentuate the patterns on the face to make them look like these kind of white zombies, or these zombies that are, and there is a movie called White Zombie with good makeup effects with Bela Lugosi. But they've got all these like shades on themselves of what makes them kind of a monster that's foreboding, respectful, but could chew you up and blow you up at any second, whether you respect it or not, because it's a monster. And monsters can tear you limb from limb. You know, that scene in Edward Scissorhands I'm always reminded of, where Edward Scissorhands is never completed, and Vincent Price is like dying in his arms. And I thought, that's Vincent Price's last movie. He dies in the movie, and then a couple of years after the movie came out, he died. And you're thinking, nothing is more beautiful than watching Johnny Depp try to hug Vincent Price when he's going downtown dead. I mean, that makes you cry. That wrenches your guts. That's the whole history of the cinema turning into this one moment where Roger Corman's favorite actor, Vincent Price, is trying to hug this monster that he built. And in this case, it's not everything he feared about himself. It's everything he ever wanted to give a son that he couldn't have biologically, so he built one. And now the townspeople looking at Edward Scissorhands like he's this monster is the horror film side of it, but Vincent Price and Johnny Depp are playing it that it's like his Pinocchio, his big dream to create man, his big dream to have a son, and that he doesn't get to finish him seems tragic. But then Edward Scissorhands, he uses his ability for all kinds of, interesting utilitarian type practices. And plus he gets to make out with Winona Ryder. So really, if I had to choose, Scissorhands just to get a hug effect around Winona Ryder, I'd probably do that. But that's just how I get bribed into films that I'm not even in. And Edward Scissorhands, I'm trying not to cry when Vincent Price goes out like that, but it's like, he's the Dr. Frankenstein creating the monster. Only this time the monster does blow up the whole house only because his master's dead. See, in Frankenstein, he didn't really think of Dr. Frankenstein as a master. He did think, I'm going to kill this guy because he created me at all and created me this way, and now I'm pissed to know that I've been given these monstrous qualities by this guy, so I'm just going to kill him no matter what. So he blows up the castle at the end of part 1. Before Bride of Frankenstein. Bride of Frankenstein, you don't even need to go into how hairstyles make that movie. And hairstylists are another type of special effect that never get the credit they're due. Except for maybe Edith Head as costume designer, most designers on a film are in the credits and nobody can remember who they are unless they're really intense super film buffs are in the movie, because then they're like, yeah, that makeup artist is the best. Like, I can tell you that Ashley and Amanda Sheedy and even a few other of the cast are incredible makeup designers. Incredible Hollywood style makeup designers. Now, I don't wear makeup. I'm a guy. I'm supposed to look pale, gaunt, and sickly, right? Because I'm teaching film, and everybody knows that's not a lucrative background, even though James Cameron's so rich because he has to spend all his film money on a film, and meanwhile, he can't afford the energy drink I'm going to sell him later. But I'm going to trade him an energy drink to show me a special effect. That's what we do at Digital Domain. No, I'm just kidding. But the point is now we get back to The Exorcist, and now we're really starting to look at the idea that now that it's a blockbuster, over $100 million came in from it. Cost about $80 million to make. That was a big risk. Max von Sydow, It's a big risk, and they're trying to take the risk off. But William Friedkin's not really trying to take the risk off, because after his montages flew through the racetrack of his movie before The Exorcist, which was The French Connection. And The French Connection has this ending special effects car race, and car races are always kind of special effects with where they design where to put the camera, why they're going off screen, how close does this have to look to bullet. No. But they take the car scene in The French Connection, and it's the one where Gene Hackman's flying through that underground thing. Roy Scheider and Gene Hackman are chasing through this underground subway thing. They hit like 3 babies, and no, they didn't hit any babies. But they're driving through this place, and they're going real fast, and this is already the hyperkinetic, frenetic, and then French Connection wins an Oscar for Best Picture, and now William Friedkin's on a roll. He says, let's go his all out, balls out on The Exorcist. That's not really what he said, but maybe it was. But the fact that he saved that whole project by making it so expressionistic that it's over the top, even almost on a Troma level. Now, Troma, I've worked for, and they do over-the-top publicity stunts and over-the-top things constantly, but they're like so over-the-top that they're like, you ready to go more than over-the-top? And I look at movies like The Exorcist, and I look at movies that like take it real far, and they kind of remind me of Troma films. So Troma's kind of doing it as a joke to blow off steam. Like, hey, we need entertained. Somebody blow this place up, We need an entertainment. Let's have it look like an A-bomb just hit us. But with The Exorcist, it's like they're not only going to be entertained, they're going to be royally shocked. Now, shock art's interesting because it works with Kenneth Anger and Andy Warhol and these avant-garde guys. They have a normal, or Stan Brackett, where they have this normal footage, something totally heinously never seen anywhere else, normal footage, and that's shock art. And The Exorcist doesn't have much normal footage, although it does kind of emphasize this everyday world of the everyday. Once she plays the Ouija board, sees the chick on the horse, the devil's there. None of that's shown. I bet they filmed it in some like Equus way, but none of it's shown. And then all of a sudden, this girl's ransacked, got the worst disease ever. She's got the devil and a bunch of demons in her. Now, I'm surprised that, I'm glad, though, that they didn't bring too much Christian doctrine into it, because the original book is Catholic. And the Catholics have this, ego thing where they can actually, we can actually possess you with demons and dispossess you. Now, one thing that never gets covered in The Exorcist is the idea that psychologically, you could be affected by psychological demons, and people, hear me out, don't do this, but psychological demons can be inflicted through certain modes of not correct use of psychology. And that's it's a controversial fact, but I've never met a psychologist that's used a bad technique, on me. It's not like they were hauling me off. I've had a couple of encounters with psychologists. They're not like, well, you're incurable. That's going to take 2 lobotomies and a screening of Shutter Island while it's on. They're not using these psychology tactics against us, but think about how many psychological tactics our own friends use against us to kind of veer our choices. And I'm not saying they're bad friends. they're like, we're gonna go to the movies and you're gonna come too. So now I'm on the spot and I'm like, well, I can't afford the movies, but I'll go cobble up some of my weed money and see if I can go to the movies, right? And I've been at the movies for like nights now and I don't remember what I was watching. But that's the curse of being in postdoctoral school and teaching, knowing that you're like years behind on your teaching. You just kind of pay. And now, so psychologically, I've been affected by everyone because they're like, well, you have your big degree, but you've got tons more school. So now I'm like frantically getting through these things, going like, I got 12 more years of this, and MASTERCLASS is cool with helping me out through that. And I can't make any mistakes. So now I'm psychologically starting to get on the edge. So my psychologist would be like, and you still like doing it, don't you? She's kind of double-edged sword me because, oh, not right now. So she's kind of got this double-edged sword about it where she's like, I think that'd be really hard to do, and I can't believe you still enjoy doing it. And she approves that I do these things. In fact, she approves that I have a band so much that she won't let me quit my band. She's like, do you know how many people would be depressed and get out of work and be sad if you quit playing guitar? And I'm like, this is flattering. I didn't know I had a responsibility to my psychologist to keep playing music and letting it come. And if you've seen Poor White Trash or the Dead Teddy Riders, I admit we need more special effects in our band. And here I am getting off subject. But The Exorcist doesn't go down the psychological defense, except for we think the more horrible she gets with the more makeup effects and everything falling apart, is the expression we're having that's making us, of course, psychologically going, this is freaking scary. Satan's in the house, the kid's getting ruined, this little girl's getting ruined, and the priests are like looking like weird gypsy traders from Egypt, and the mom is Ellen Burstyn, and she's in her her usual woman under the influence review of being totally the gauntleted mother that no one listens to, and that her daughter's getting chewed up by this satanic thing. Is kind of one of the things I like about The Exorcist is that the priests do almost lose. But I thought it would have been a way better movie, and nobody agrees with me because of the psychological effect, that the priests get housed when they show up. And if the priests get housed while they show up, then that means it's a bad ending. The girl goes to hell and lives with the devil and has taken her soul down to hell. And that would have been such a better movie. But it may not have had the box office effect of these priests knocked a demon out of her. We don't usually tell you the priests are important, but the priests actually did knock the demon out of him. So now you're like, well, if the priest knocked a demon out of him, then now we got our money's worth, because that means demons can be defeated. I'm like, does anyone have a kid whose bed is floating off the ground and they're puking thick green soup and want to call the police more than calling a priest? Oh, I don't know, dude. I don't usually call them a priest for exorcisms, but when I do, I think, is that really going to work? Because are there such things as demons? Or is it only psychological demons? And the hilarious thing is this is about a demon that psychologically affects us because it's so grotesque and faranged and totally torn apart with these images of her face getting blurry and puke coming out of her mouth and her head spinning all the 360 degrees out around her body. And then they're totally showing this like gothic dementia of the whole thing, where like they're going further and further into the spiral, and it's deforming them more and more. And that's kind of a Grand Guignol concept of the mire, or the sort of downward spiral of first you're on the team, and then you kind of get like this Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars dilapidation of the character into their true evil mask. And the actors kind of have these masks that are not masks, but makeup, and the way they look in the shot, the way they train. Actors have to train so much that it doesn't matter if it's a special effect or not. It's still fucking hard. And these guys that are actors and actresses like Leonardo DiCaprio, Uma Thurman, they're really good at what they do, but they trained for like hours and hours and hours. And that's why nobody can ask too much to make a movie. Carnival of Souls, yeah, they did it for cheap, but that's no excuse for these actors that are going to boot camp to play in war and, that should be worth a lot because they're already worth a lot as property. They're going to make the money for the movie and the publicity just by being good actors. But the stuff they have to go through to get there is almost even more gauntlet rendering just in the training as being a female in like a silent film where you're about to teeter over the edge of a cliff because of perils of Pauline and you dropped your glasses off a hot air balloon and now you've got to go sink voyage to the bottom of the sea to get the glasses back. And trust me, I've been there. So but we're at The Exorcist and we're thinking they're putting these grotesque big things on. Now, why does the big and the examples of hoary like special effects appeal to us? Because we daydream in expressionism, or we see an impression and it kind of leads us to an expression. Let me explain that. Freud says that when you've been a certain way and acted a certain way and something's taken away from you, like you've grown up and your imagination's been taken away from you, that you spend your life wanting back what you lost, and what you've lost is kind of a lack, and that lack creates an error that something is in the void, and the void is increasing, and then you cover it up with like these big, with pushing out, projecting these big movies, and movies are totally big projections of what we all lost or what we don't have. And a lot of times I think that is kind of a cool thing because even the movies that die out and you never get to see and disappear that are from the silent era, even though sound films are affected because the timelines come to that crunch where other films are dying and disappearing just from their organic compound decomposing. But you think, now we're going to make a version of this film that had Barbara Stanwyck that's draining into this fluid that can't be renewed. But we're missing something, we're lacking something, we see some pictures on the internet, we're going to freaking make the biggest movie ever, you know? I mean, that's how it goes. And that's what I like about how William Friedkin made this into a blockbuster. And I'm so glad it was the first blockbuster ever. That was a horror film. Everybody saw it. You had to see it. You had to pray along with the Catholic priests. You had to kind of think, wow, the devil's decked out in his total, like, fury. The good versus evil thing is ambiguous, but it does kind of fall on the side of, well, we're the priests and we can do this. You know, it's like, even though Max von Sydow dies in the middle of it, but that was just because of boredom, because he was reading the Bible and he never had. Just kidding. But the thing is that, like, the special effects are so staunch. Heavy-handed's not a good word, because heavy-handed would mean that you'd have to come to the theater dressed like the Exorcist in kind of a Rocky Horror Picture Show kind of way. Heavy-handed's a good term to use about film directing, where they're laying it on too thick. They're like, if you don't believe me now, you'll believe me now. But I kind of am a sucker for that, because it's usually directors going, believe me now? You don't have to, but look at this. You don't have to, but look at this. Now you're probably in suspended disbelief because I just got you to believe this whole story of the Titanic, and the Titanic happened 100 years ago, but now it's happening right on the screen as though it happened in an even bigger way. Because something we lost, we're identifying it with the biggest show on earth, the greatest show on earth, and here we go with the unpredicted one, the horror film to sell them all, The Exorcist. And when we say it's commercial, it is, but it's so offbeat for commercial because it has things in it that are so horrific and scary that only the horror film, like a movie like Bride of Frankenstein or Freaks, could have come up with this genre that has these subversive elements that are so bucket of blood and thrown around and fighting with the devil and everything, that you get these expressionistic look at what we've been missing with the horror film. That Night of the Living Dead we'll get to in another class, and we'll see that that one actually was the one that paved the way for The Exorcist, because Night of the Living Dead cost like Carnival of Souls money and made like more money, as much money as Easy Rider, which is millions and millions, a franchise in and of itself. A movie gets to like $100 million, it becomes a franchise. And then it becomes like, there are actually buildings that grow out of the ground for a movie that's $100 million, just the movie. It's like, welcome to our Titanic accounting building. It's all run by robots. James Cameron's like, dang, I forgot to bring my ATM card. I wonder if my ID will work. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, the point is that The Exorcist does that thing that James Cameron was showing me, a digital man, like where they take film printers. This is before they could really do digital. And on this director's cut, I know they had some flashes of digital, but hear me out. Each frame that has to be matched with a special effect that's either in camera or off. Well, if it's in camera, it's done at the time usually of the shoot, or the next shot. But the regular special effect, you're going to take composite material of things you filmed, kind of get them stenciled out and cut out, and spliced by a computer into all these images that are a little bit different for 24 frames a second. And then they can put those images, bam, right on top, visual printing, optical printing, right on top of the other pictures, so they can match perfectly where they've all been measured to match, but now you're actually colluding them. That's a hard process. But the today standard, where you're designing things on a computer, is the same principle, because you still have to take the computer image, merge it with the digital picture if there is any live action or even just a cartoon, and you're merging all these things now, and you still have to go by, if it's 29 frames a second, 24, it's still like 29 is a little faster, but if it's still these shots being put in, you still have to put them in, you still have to nuance them, you still have to make them look right. But the computer is cutting the idea out or printing onto this organic film stock that's so important that we get the right printout, that it could ruin our film as a filmmaker if we're putting the scene in and something glitches with the printer. Because now we might be fighting with, that was the only turf I had to make it, so we always duplicate prints. This problem is avoided with digital. Digital takes care of, if you had the $1 million computer, it takes care of your bin of all your clips, and all your clips can be taken back from scratch to where you can put them back together if the effect didn't work and you're still pissed at the computer and it still took you all day to get 10 seconds worth. But at least now you're not like determining whether the outcome of the film is going to change whether you get the special effect or not, which you are doing that. But what you're really doing is saying, this is going to be a more effective way of putting it in, not really cost effective, but effective way to putting it in, because I can't lose anything. I got this on the computer and that on the computer, and unless we have a royal glitch out, which they don't really, then the computer, it can save and store all the structures of the film, whereas like with the film stock, you're looking through these canisters, and I could just see James Whale come in and he's like, I want to change something about Bride of the Monster. Can I have reel 3, act 7? He's like, no, I'm going to put a fluff of hair here digitally. No, that's kind of cool that you can do it digitally, but James Whale had to do that kind of thing with the old dark house where the old man gets that little goatee. He had to do those touches while they're going. And so the old dark house was made as a special effects extravaganza where there's trap doors and they're going everywhere and everybody's not trusting each other and Charles Lawton's picking up all the chicks. And they've got this whole house rocking and you're thinking, man, if one subtle special effect had been different, I wonder if I'd have bought that story. And I do buy that story. That's a good story. And that film could have really gotten ruined if the film printer and if the makeup and hair and everything had gone wrong. But it also gives James Whale the credit of blowing up these kind of exaggerated moments in this haunted house that may be ghosts. He even touches on the idea of psychological fear in that. And this is only psychological fearful, quote unquote, in almost a conditioned response way. Now, every time we see a head spin around, which is never, because it's like a copyrighted shot or something. And I like the idea of a copyrighted shot. That way you can't redo the shower scene unless you're doing a shot-by-shot remake. No, we'll get into that later. And Hitchcock's the king of special effects. That whole shower scene is a special effect. It's shot in 28 days on 56 setups, and all of these actors were used in body doubles, and the knife never hits her, but it looks like it hacks her in half. I mean, I saw that clip one time on a Dungeon Master of mine that never made it to the internet, and that is a hoary, nasty, greasy clip, bro. That clip goes off the wile, and it's all special effects. Now, why do we aestheticize the killing scene in a movie? Probably so we draw emphasis to the extremities so we can say, what have we lost? And then the film says, what are we losing? What are we about to lose? And oh, here's what you're losing. So if the movie has a happy ending, they get back kind of anything that had gone wrong. But in The Exorcist, there's still this ambiguity because the devil's ruining everything. The devil's just ruining it. He's like Godzilla. And the Jesuit priest kind of stand there looking oafish and throw some holy water on her as she's floating around the room. And ba-ding, ba-dang, she's better. You see her at the end of the film as a regular kid. And you're wondering, well, that was cool that they saved her, but I'm still thinking the non-money making, but true ending would be the devil consumes the girl and takes her to hell, and that'd be more of a Hexen ending. And that Hexen is productive in its money spending now, but I mean capitalism market now, but Hexen, you got to realize, has so many different versions, just like The Exorcist. Half the versions of Hexen are just like witches hanging out trying to cast magic, and the other half is the whole history of the Inquisition, which is done with special effects and animatronics and puppets, even in Hexen from 1922, and that Benjamin Christensen makes it a special effect extravaganza, inexpensive, socially cost Muppet dolls and devil hands, and maybe they did in Inferno and Hex and film the underground, the underworld, in ways that the camera normally can't pick up. I don't know. But if it's even special effects, it looks as cost effective as nothing. I mean, it looks like a real special effect from what we have nowadays, even though it's kind of this organic puppet. But we'll have to continue next time, because now I'm at the end of my time, and it's been a good class, and we got a little more started on the idea of like an image being there and then not being there, and us thinking, did that person just turn invisible? And this is a film technique that's fueling the story that we use the special effects for to emphasize, because usually that will pronounce the idea that we want back the big, booming spectacle of the cinema itself, and that there's minimalist techniques of expression, there's minimal techniques of impression, and we see that with Carnival of Souls in this kind of minimalist way. But it's a zombie apocalypse either way, bros. So we'll see you later next week, later in the week, or later this week, actually. We'll have our third film special effects class. Thank you for looking at COURSERA and YouTube MASTERCLASS, Harvard, USC, and CALARTS. We'll see you in a few days. All right. See you later.